Psych! Hi everybody, welcome to another episode of the Broken Meeple. I am Luke Hector, and this is the live review of Eternal Palace. So by all means, let me know in the chat whether you are able to see audio and visual or not. But for the time being, before we get on to that, just a quick word from my sponsor. As a fellow gamer, you'll understand this is unacceptable. The solution? Head down to my new sponsor, KIENDA.co.uk. KIENDA stocks many of the hot new releases, as well as some old hidden gems. Free delivery on orders over £30, further discounts on bulk purchases, and even 5% of your spending refunded back to you as points to be used for further discounts down the line. If you use the referral link in the description below and sign up for a new account, you'll get 5% discount on your first order over £60. So let's make gaps in your collection a thing of the past. Get down to KIENDA and start saving today. Thank you for listening, and enjoy the rest of the video.
Get on with it.
Thanks for that, KIENDA. Yeah, I know people don't like ads, but, you know, we gotta do it somehow. But yeah, thanks for joining me this evening. Like I say, I don't expect tons of people to be around, but thank you for joining me. I'm still testing out this format with the live review. I've even zoomed the camera back a little bit so that I can, you know, you can see my jazz hands and everything a little bit clearer. But I'm still in two minds about whether this will work. The first one that I did with Dice Theme Park last Thursday, if you can check it out, it was fine, but I made a few errors. The title screen was incorrect for one, and there was a few little like, oh Christ, what was going on there? And yeah, I wasn't overly happy with it, but I'm hoping this one will turn out a little bit better. So Eternal Palace, well, without further ado, let's actually just get on with it, shall we? So, with Eternal Palace, if you remember a game called Kingsburg, it was a dice placement, worker placement game. So you got these dice, you used them, you put them on characters, and they allowed you to get resources as well as build different buildings. Well, Eternal Palace is kind of the same sort of deal, except it's from Cat Games, and you're basically dealing with like a sort of Chinese emperor theme now. So you are still using dice, you are still putting them on worker placement spaces in order to do various things, but in terms of the weight of the game, it's still roughly about the same, but there's still a few tweaks on how you do the dice selection in the first place. Obviously, the aim of the game is a little bit different here. You are contributing to the construction of certain buildings, but it's not so much, oh, I put my mill here or anything like that. Here, what you are doing is that you are gathering painting layers. So as you can see, the cover there has got a very lovely lady there painting a beautiful canvas of some monuments that you are effectively contributing to build. But the idea is that you are using the dice to go on anywhere up to 12 different spaces on the board. And if I see, let's zoom in the camera a little bit more on that one. The idea is that every time you use dice, they go on the location and you resolve the action. So at the start of a round, and there's, I believe, 4 rounds in the game, 4 or 5, I can't entirely remember off the top of my head, but what happens is, at the start of the round, everybody collects their dice, of which you start with 3, but you can get more, and you roll them, and everybody can see what you've rolled. And the total value of the dice determines initiative order for the round, and this is very important. At that point, players then put the dice behind a little screen that they have, and the idea is that behind their screen, they will decide, let's see if I can find a better, ooh, there's some weird photos with some of these, let's try and find, well, we'll try that one. And the idea is that by putting the dice behind their screen, they are grouping them into different groups. So you can have a group of 1, a group of 2, a group of 3, and it's all about the totals. So I could group a 5 and a 3 here, for example, and make that 8. I could take a 6 on its own, make it a 6, make a 4 on its own, make it a 4. I could even take 4 dice and make 12, you know, by whatever means necessary. 3, 3, 3, 3, I guess. And the idea is that you do this in secret. So you kind of know what values the other players have done, but you don't necessarily know what they're going to group the dice into. You then all reveal your screen and show off the dice. And then in that same turn order that I mentioned a minute ago with the initiative, you take it in turns to choose one of your groups of dice and place them on the board and resolve the action. You carry on until everybody's run out of dice, at which point you then have a small refresher of the advisor cards that you see at the bottom. Everybody gets their dice back, and players can collect more dice depending on whether it's kind of like a catch-up mechanism. If you're losing or you've got the least amount of dice, you'll get more dice. The tiebreaker is this little palace track here on the left, where the highest, like the one who's moved furthest on the palace track, will get a die in there. But by the end of the game, everybody should have their maximum allowance of 5 dice. So it's kind of like there's an incentive to get your dice earlier, but there's a catch-up mechanism, which means everybody will get their dice. It's not one of those deals where in order to get more dice you have to go out of your way to constantly try and get more dice. It's not like other worker placement games where suddenly it's like, oh, Paramount, I must get these extra dice. Because honestly, you can do pretty well with just 3 or 4 dice in this. It's really not that much of a problem. And so you rinse and repeat this for a few more rounds, at which point you total up points. Now, the points that you get come from primarily painting layers. So what on earth am I talking about with painting layers? Well, you have got, look at these lovely little pictures, little artwork in that. You have a little canvas screen at the back, and then you can get these little feature paintings, which this monument and this little tree is kind of that. But you'll notice these layers have all got a number on them, the 5 and 10. And what you're essentially doing with that, in fact, I've just noticed the banner needs to change on this. 1 second. This is the problem with trying to do things by yourself. Nope, that's not the one. There we go. That's a bit better. And so the idea with this is that you collect these layers. So when you're on the board, every time you go to one of the spaces on the board, you'll notice that each one of them's got a little track to the left of it. So every time you visit the location, this little marker moves up the track, and when you get to the top, you take the painting layer for that location. So there's 12 at least. But if you can get to the top first, you nick this little feature token, and you get like a little feature painting, as I said, a monument, a statue, a tree, whatever, which is also another victory point. The game will end after so many rounds. I said 4 or 5 rounds. It's actually more accurate to say that it ends after somebody gets their 8th painting layer. So there's 12 of them to get, but you only need to get 8 in order to trigger the end of the game at the end of the round. And most of your points will come from these layers. There's a few little extra points you can get from the palace track at the end. There's a couple of extra bonus points for having, like for finishing first or having the sequential sequence of your layers. So let's say I got 8, 9, and 10 painting layers. That's better than somebody getting a 4, 5, and 6, you know. So it's basically highest in sequence. But aside from that, you are mainly talking about the painting layers, as well as these 4 monuments. You'll notice they're represented by tokens here. But let me try and see if I can get a little zoom in on some of them here. Well, these spaces here, 3, 5, and 8, for example. Those spaces have you contribute resources, of which the cost goes up as you do each one. And basically the monument token goes to the player who went there last. The cost goes up as each time, but you get the painting layer as well as the monument, which is an extra victory point. But if somebody goes back to that location and contributes more, they'll take the monument off you. So it's kind of like a little mini tug of war system. But that's essentially mainly how it works. It is a case of, right, I've got these dice, roll. Right, well, I'm going last this round because I got high values. All right, well, you've got a bunch of 5s. I've got 5s here as well. We could be contesting for spaces. And you can go to where somebody else has put dice, but it costs fish. Fish is another resource in this game alongside stone and wood and all the usual. But the fish is what you tend to spend to either get more advisors or you get... like, you can go onto spaces shared with other people. What are advisors? Well, the advisors are these cards that you can see here on the right, but I knew I had a better photo for those, so let's show you what they are. Yep, here. Basically, the advisors are kind of like special ability cards. A couple of spaces, number 1 and 2 at the bottom, allow you to draft from a face-up display or just draw them from the deck. And these advisors give you special powers. So some of them, for example, that you trade X into Y. Some of them, if you rolled the lowest at the start of the round, you get a bonus. My favorite ones, though, are these ones here where you can see like 2 hands that go a bit like this, as well as like a sort of helping hand. They are ones where you collect something really cool, but you have to give your opponent something as well. So in a multiplayer game, you're effectively going, right, well, this one here, for example, I can get 2 resources of my choice. Fantastic. But I have to give somebody free fish. Who do I give free fish to? You? Do you want free fish? Maybe you. And you're typically giving it to the person in losing position, but there is that kind of artificial catch-up mechanism there. You can have a bunch of these advisors and they do all sorts of cool things, but they're effectively ways to aid you on like your journey to basically get all the painting layers. Aside from that, the rest of the game is pretty straightforward. You go to most of these spaces just get you the resources. There's some that get you a wisdom token which allows you to manipulate the dice to mitigate some of the luck factor, but it's basically, like I say, not the best explanation, but it's kind of as simple as that, really. You are just basically collecting resources, contributing to monuments, and racing up those little tracks in order to get the painting layers. So, on that note, why don't we move on to my general thoughts? Alright, general thoughts. I just realised I clicked the banner and not the thing. Come on, we gotta have the little banner. There we go. That's better. But, right, so with this, I've mentioned before that this could be like a Kingsburg killer. And Kingsburg was a decent game in its own right. If you're not entirely familiar with what Kingsburg is, let me bring up a picture of the game for you. This came out about 2007 odd, and Kingsburg has dropped a bit in rating for me. It originally came out in a fairly nice looking edition here, so a Strathherb, I forget who produced it, but it was like quite a while ago. And Kingsburg allowed you to use dice in various ways to build buildings and, you know, use the abilities of characters. It was a decent game, but it started getting a little bit old. Like I was like, I'm kind of bored using these same characters all the time, and you know, you fought some enemies every now and again, and it was fine, but you really needed an expansion for it to work. There was a little expansion called To Forge a Realm, and everybody who's played Kingsburg will tell you that that expansion was essential. Well, they then re-implemented it with the second edition of Kingsburg, and I thought, okay, this would be a pretty good way to go about it, except they made it look horrible. I'm sorry, but please don't take your... Well, actually, Kingsburg, I think, came first. I don't know if this came first or Gloomhaven, but seriously, whichever one came first, the other person really should not have taken their aesthetical designs from the other. This is, like, loaded in horrible browns, muted colors. Those characters pretty much look the same for the most part, you know, apart from a couple of, like, major costume changes, because they're all just dreary, brown, black muted. I mean, that looks boring. It was horrible aesthetics. That was the biggest problem with the second edition. It included To Forge a Realm in it, and as well as some extra characters and that, which was cool. But seriously, how do you make the game go from the previous color scheme to this? Horrible. It looks like a Gloomhaven board. It's all reds and browns everywhere. So I was not a big fan. So I figured, okay, cool. Can we have a better version of Kingsburg now? And overall, yes, but there are some caveats here. So why don't we start off with some good points. Firstly, this game looks gorgeous. I mean, you've seen some of those pictures I was showing before. They do not look... You know, this game looks beautiful, doesn't it? Let me grab another picture here. There you go. So this was me playing the solo mode, I believe, and I'll get onto that a bit later, but this is a very good looking game. I mean, the painting layers, as you saw, have got beautiful artwork on it, and so have this board, the advisor cards. I mean, the characters and the advisors look a little bit weird. I mean, some of them have got like some sort of crazy jaw lines and that, but aside from that, it's a very beautiful game to look at, and it kind of needs to be, especially when you start using these like painting layers around the place. These definitely have to look good, although it's a bit of a catch-22, and we'll get onto that later. Component-wise is not too bad either. I mean, you've got, bear in mind this is a retail version, you've got cubes for, you've got, basic resource shapes, like rectangular stones and some minor little niches for twigs and that. You've got a resource called kaolin, which I think is kind of like a Chinese stone or something, but this is the first time I've ever heard it mentioned, and let's face it, by the time you get to the end of this game, you're going to be annoyed with that word, trying to remember it all. But the rest of the game is fairly generic, other than the landscape painting layers, because the dice are colourful, but they're pretty basic dice. The fish are just little cardboard tokens. The wisdom is just little cardboard tokens, and the monuments, yes, in the deluxe version, you can get these really nice miniatures, but here you basically just get a little square tile with a picture of the miniature on it. It's a little bit on the fiddly side. The game is also a lot smaller looking than you first realise, because I've not blown this through. I've not blown this up. This is how big the board is. It's really not that big. So let me show you it. Hang on, let me get back to my full screen here. This is the board. That's it. It's this small. It really is kind of that small. I was expecting it to be larger, and I first played it on a big table and realised, this might be a little bit of a problem. And as much as this means that this can fit on a nice small table, and it doesn't have a huge amount of table presence, so it doesn't take up much room, it does mean that some stuff is a little bit hard to look at. Can you read what that bit says there? No? How about now? Can you read that small text? How about now? 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 Maybe now? How about now? Wow. You don't desperately need to read that text, because it's basically just reiterating what you kind of already know from the rules. You advance up to the top and get a painting layer. But seriously, what person did they think had 20... I've got 20/20 vision, and I struggle to read those at a distance. It's kind of insane. And, you know, it makes everything look a little bit small, and means that if you play this on any kind of large surface, you're going to have people struggle to see what's what on here. But to be fair, it is nice and refreshing to not have a ginormous board taking up the entire table for a change. In terms, well, we'll get on actually, no, let's continue with the component. Actually, we'll get onto that a bit later. Let's move on to a more positive thing. Those advisor cards that I mentioned are pretty sweet. I do really like the advisors. I mean, there's only 4 different types of advisors that you can get. Where are all the advisors? I thought I had a proper picture of a bunch of them. Let's see. I guess not. Well, maybe we can use the Kickstarter page and borrow that for a little bit. Come on, let's find some. Here we go. So these kind of advisors that you get, they're pretty simple abilities. I mean, some just get you an instant bonus, some let you trade X for Y, and I really do like the ones which say that you give an opponent some resources and you get resources. You don't get them from the opponent, your opponent's getting something for free. And there's a lot of banter around the table to say, like, oh come on, you gotta give me the free fish. I need the free fish. Look, they've got loads of fish. You give him don't give him the fish. He's got an entire fish market there. I need it. I'm losing, you know. And it just creates that little bit of extra banter around the table. But I think it's not only a pretty cool catch-up mechanism, because it's not forced. Yeah, the player is forced to give something away, but it's not artificially forced. Somebody has to get the advisor card and choose to use it. It's not like at the end of every round, you all, like the losing player gets a bunch of fish for no reason. It just adds that little bit of extra interaction, but these don't give you points at the end of the game, so you're getting it for their various abilities. They're not complicated, they only come in 4 main types as such, and the iconography is pretty straightforward. As much as I give the components a little bit of crud, the artwork and the iconography is pretty straightforward. I mean, you can tell what resources are what, you can tell that's fish, you can tell these are wisdom tokens. It's a pretty straightforward setup in terms of graphic design. Now, going back to the whole components thing just briefly, there is a slight problem here. And I do mean slight, because yes, the problem is like big. It's a bit of a fail, but it's one of those ones that you can easily avoid and just do without. The title of this video was, can a gimmick go too far? And by gimmick, I mean these. You get a little canvas screen here, and you put these painting layers and you can arrange them on your canvas to basically build a painting. They come in this storage box, which is a bit of a nightmare to set up and take down, because you have to get like bundles of 3 of the types of layers and then put them in one bit, and then get the next 3 bits and put them on top of that, and then the 3 bits and put them on top of that. And then at the start of the game, you've got to arrange them in this kind of display so that you can easily take one off when you need it. Adds a little bit to the setup and takedown of the game, but that's not the bit I'm getting a bit more annoyed with. No, we don't want Architects of the West Kingdom here, go away. What problem we get, if I can find a good example, is this. The whole thing of building the picture painting, right? This was taken at my Dice Cafe when I was playing it the first time I played it multiplayer at the cafe, and you can build this painting. And it looks cool. I mean, that, I believe, was my painting or something. Or somebody's painting, I can't remember. But I think I was halfway through the game at this point. And it looks good. Look at the mountain backdrop and the thing there. And you can spend your time arranging the layers as you get them, going, oh, I reckon I can put that there and put the hill at the back. And take this river and, oh, that looks really nice with the statue in the front. It means, mechanically, absolutely nothing. It is entirely a gimmick. You get a point for each layer in every feature painting. That's it. You don't get bonus points for having the best painting at the end of the day. There is no voting system to say, oh, you had the best canvas, therefore you get an extra point. It's entirely there as a gimmick. Now, I had commented when I did the preview video for this last year that it's quite a fun gimmick. And it is. When I was playing it on Tabletop Simulator and with the prototype components, it was fun to basically spend my downtime in between turns, which there isn't a huge amount of downtime in this game, but it was good to just sort of go, nice little painting there, little painting there. I know I want to go to that space next, but right now I need to arrange the statue on top of here. It's your go loot. Oh, sweet. Right, I'm just going to go to number 5, get some stone, and I'm good. Right, now that feature paint. Oh, I got a new layer. Oh, I could put that in here, and it does get a little bit addictive in a funny way. So it's kind of cool. But here's a problem. You see these canvas stands? I'm just going to say it in blunt fashion. They suck. Absolutely suck. Basically, it's this. It's a little cardboard. Let's say we're going to have to zoom out here. Right, you're supposed to have this as kind of a little thing that you put on the table to show off the canvas. And it's nigh on impossible to try and figure out how you're supposed to fold the thing in the first place. I forget if I'm missing a piece here. I think I'm missing a piece, yeah. Let's see if I can get it out. I'm not going to assemble it for you because, frankly, it's too fiddly to do with 2 hands here. But you're supposed to, like, fold it out slightly like this and then slot this on the top so it slides down on top. And the idea is that you effectively create a little canvas stand. Firstly, this is cheap and nasty. Secondly, it keels over at the slightest gust of air. People walk behind me to get to the loos, right, at this particular table, okay? And just their sheer, sorry, on this picture, right? And as soon as anybody walks past me, or if any draft comes through, it'll knock these things over. And you're trying to balance 12 layers worth of feature paintings and stuff on this thing, and it's fiddly. It's weird, it's annoying, it falls over, and it's such a cheap, shoddy component that they just didn't need. Now, as much as I'm ragging on it, you don't need it. As I said, mechanically, it makes no difference. You could literally just get the canvas, which is the basic rectangular piece of card, put it flat on the table, and create your painting from that if you want to go along with the gimmick. That's it. You don't need to have the stupid little stand to do it all for you. It's a completely pointless thing, and I never get them out anymore. I will never take them out of the box. I'll just give people their canvas and say, look, here it is. Here's the painting layers. They're worth a victory point each. You want to build your painting, go right ahead, and ideally do so just for the fun and gimmick. But yeah, never with these things. I'm almost this close and just chucking them in the trash, because honestly, they serve no other purpose than just being a fiddly nightmare. Right. Now, in terms of player scaling is a little bit hit and miss, because the problem that you have with player scaling is it depends whether you play this at high player counts or lower player counts. You end up with a situation where you have a pro at one end and a con, and the same goes for the other end. So let me show you this board here. This was our first game in that. So we were playing this with 5 players. Okay, 5 players. Now, in this case, 5 players is... I'm never playing this with 5 players again. It is stupid. Never play with 5 players. It was literally put on the box to sell more copies. If you play this at a high player count, firstly, the time length for the game goes up exponentially. Normally, this game should take you somewhere in the region of about 60 minutes. At the most, it should take you 90. But you could get this done in 60 minutes with 2 or 3 players easily, right? It's quite a short, quick game. You take this to 4 or 5 players though, particularly 5, and you're teaching new players, this game easily gets to 90 to 2 hours, and that is way too long for the market that this game is for. Ignore the 5 on the box, because it literally adds nothing else but time. There is no other benefit to a 5th player being there. Not to mention that you want to balance these little markers, 5 of them on each track, and move them all the time. Trust me, you'll want to tear up the game board as soon as that starts becoming a regular thing. Now, 4 player is fine if people know what they're doing. I'm a little bit hesitant to teach this with 3 new players at the table. But then, okay, so you're thinking, well, why don't I just play this with 2 or 3 players then? Well, yeah, 2 or 3 players is a lot quicker. But here's the other flip side. The tension for the spaces. You can go to spaces where other people are. All you've got to do is spend a fish for every other player that's there. Now in a 2 to 3 player game, you don't get a lot of tension because the board doesn't scale. There's no locations taken out. There's no reverse side of the board for 2 to 3 players. This is the board you get. So you still have 12 locations with only 2 or 3 players and no extra dice. So you don't really get in each other's way that much. But then at 4 and 5 players, yes, you're getting in each other's way more often, but still, you've only got to spend a fish for each other player, including yourself, so you can't spam the same location. You're not often going to go to the same location multiple times, and honestly, fish is pretty easy to come by. It's the most common resource. I mean, the level 1 location down here, you can choose to get an advisor by spending the resource cost for the advisor and taking free fish. And, you could get given free fish by another player just from this advisor card here. The fish is really not that hard to come by, so unlike something like Kingsburg, you don't really feel a huge amount of tension for the worker placement spots. It's more about the race up these little tracks. That's where the tension comes in, because obviously getting to the top not only gets you the painting layer, but it gets you the feature painting piece as well. That's what people are more worried about. Not like, oh, you went to my space, now I've got to spend a fish. Whoopee. Nobody really cares. Here though, you're more a case of, if I don't go to this location twice, orange is going to go there, and then next round I could go last, which means, oh no, they're going to overtake me and they're going to take that feature painting. Maybe I should go there now. I don't know. Well, you're probably thinking about the mercy of the dice. Not so, because you do have the wisdom tokens. So the wisdom tokens, let's see if I can find a decent painting here. So this is my other solo game, we'll get onto that. These white tokens allow you to manipulate the dice. Spend 1, you can augment a dice up or down 1. Great, that's really cool. And this is after you've already selected Group's Mind. 2 of them can be spent to warp a dice from 1 to 6 or 6 to 1, and you can spend as many of them as you can afford, and you may have a lot of wisdom tokens, you may not have many, it depends what actions you take. But this mitigates the dice luck a lot, and they are very useful and definitely glad to have them in the game. But it also allows you to make those changes on the fly. Like, too many people go to the location you want, or if somebody's really threatening to take that feature painting off you, you could be like, well, I was only going to go there once, but if I spend 2 wisdom tokens and a fish, I could take that 6 down to a 4, which means I could go to that location again. Do I need the stone? No, but I get to the top of the track and I get a feature painting, maybe that's better. It allows for tactical choices, and I think the wisdom tokens for luck mitigation work great. So now, why do we talk about the solo mode? So, as David Digby is in the chat, I bet he's been waiting for this one. I have played this in every player count. I have also played it solo, as you can see from some of my pictures have been showing, if I go back, where I've been setting it up on my table and playing it. So this is me as yellow playing against blue, effectively as solo. The idea with this, and I'm trying to remember it clearly enough, is you basically have these master cards, much like in a few of the other like West Kingdom trilogies. Now you can pick one of 6 different personalities. I think it's 6, yeah, one of 6 different personalities for the opponent. So they might focus on monuments, they might focus on getting the advisors, they might focus on the palace track more. And it's quite cool because this little track basically is like a priority diagram to say, right, can they with the dice go to a particular location? And will it give them a benefit? That's the key thing. Does it give them a benefit to go there? They won't just go there willy-nilly. And if the answer is no, then it will say, well, right, well, can I do it if I spend a fish? Okay, no. All right, in that case, I'll go on the palace track. Will that get me a benefit, though? No? Or in that case, I'll use a wisdom token to manipulate the die up. Does that work? No. Then I'll try manipulating it down. Okay? I'll try manipulating it twice up. And you basically just keep going down the path until one of those becomes true, so that whatever action the opponent takes, it's a benefit. That's cool in itself. This is a really nice little deck though. You basically have a deck of master cards, and what you do is after you have chosen, bearing in mind you and the AI are getting dice at a similar pace to the multiplayer game, but you set the opponent up with multicolored dice. So I'm yellow in this case, and they basically take one of one or two of the other colors. I forget the exact setup. But what you are doing is that you customize the deck ahead of time based on the personality you're doing. So in this case, the personality is represented by symbols. But if I'm using this, like in this case, the yin yang personality, then this card, as well as anything else that's got the symbol, will be in the deck. So the deck is semi-customized. But what you do is, After you have rolled the dice for both you and the AI, you group up your tokens first, sorry, your dice first, and then you flip over the top card of this deck. Let's see if I can get a picture of the cut. Yeah, here we go. So hopefully you can see that all right in the distance there. But it will have several rows with the different color dice on it. So I've rolled these dice for the opponent, and it's telling me where to put the dice. So the 4 goes here, the 6 goes there, the 4 green goes there, there is no yellow in this case, and the like pink one goes there. That creates the AI's group. And then what will tend to happen is that if the AI can go somewhere that matches your dice group, so if he plays a 6 and I've also got a 6 in my thing, he'll try to go there first to block me and make life annoying for myself. So this simulates a multiplayer opponent pretty well, actually, because most multiplayer opponents are going to try and beat you to a location so they don't have to spend fish. You won't know what the opponents are going to group their dice into because it's all hidden behind the screen when you play in multiplayer. So with this setup, a very simple, like a simple way of doing it, but it works very well and it's pretty smooth. There's not a lot of... I don't get the rule book. There's not a lot of rules for it either. I mean, there's your page reference for the multiplayer. It's pretty straightforward rules. But the solo mode is basically... Here we go. You've got, components and setup for a page. That barely is any reading whatsoever. And then you've got, effectively... 3 pages of rules for the solo mode. Not a huge amount of pictures. I wish there was more pictures here, but honestly, it's big font. It's pretty easy rules. You'll be up and going with the solo mode in no time. In fact, I dare say you could actually try and teach yourself the rules of this game with the solo mode, although ideally I recommend you play a multiplayer game first and then jump into the solo mode. But yeah, solo mode's pretty solid, actually. I enjoy playing it that way. In fact, to be honest, I think I would play this game more 2 and 3 players and then play it at solo more than I would play it with 4 or 5 players, honestly. I mean, 5 players is dead to me. I have no intention of playing this with 5 ever again. 4 depends on who I'm playing it with, and I might just rather play it solo. 2 or 3 players is still a good multiplayer experience, though, subject to that tension issue I mentioned earlier. But, yeah. I mean, Dice Theme Park had a pretty good solo mode in it, and this one does too. It's simple to implement. It's in the retail version. Yes, you've got mini expansions in the deluxe version that you won't have here, although they are in the rulebook. But the solo mode comes with every edition of the game, and it's cool. It's a neat way to play. And it's difficult. You've got varying levels of difficulty on how they score, but it's not a pushover. And scores are very tight in this game in generally, and that's another cool aspect. Scores will generally finish between 10 and 20. If you've got more than 20 points, you've done very well. And even then, you're only going to get into the early 20s. Somebody doing badly might barely get 7 or might get 10 or 11 points. But if you're closely knit, you could be just in the high teens for points. And there could be like 1 point differentials between 2 or 3 different players. It really is tight. It's a low scoring game, and you know what? Finally. I'm kind of getting sick and tired of these games that finish you on 270 points compared to 233 points compared to 195. The gap is too big and it doesn't feel like a close-knit game. Here though, every painting layer, every feature you get, even the tokens at the end for being furthest on the palace track or having a sequential set of canvases is important. The monuments are very important. I mean, it's a 2-point swing. You take it off another player, they lose a point, you gain a point. That's a 2-point swing, and when you're talking that a decent score here is 20 points, that's pretty good going to do that. Now, we'll get on to... I can see some questions appearing in the chat. I will get to those later, so I'll scroll back through or save them for later. Don't worry, I will answer your questions on here. Let's see if I got anything else on here. Just looking at my notes here. The low scoring I've mentioned, the fish and the horrible canvas stands, the solo mode being good. The dice puzzle itself, the dice puzzles, just as a last minute thing, is fun. It's a very interesting tactical choice to decide, right, well, I've rolled these numbers, where do I need to go? What's the best way I can group these dice? Do I have the wisdom tokens to manipulate the dice? What did the other players roll? Now, this is harder to do with 4 players, but with 2 or 3, you've only got to look at 3 to 4 dice typically from an opponent. It's not too difficult to sort of go, I reckon they're going to go to there, and they've rolled 4s. and I'm not first this round because you know the turn order in advance, it's like, oh, do I go for it or do I abandon it and do something else? It's just a nice, simple tactical choice, and even though the screens are horrible quality, I mean, I can't... they're basically as shoddy quality as this, they do at least have the rules on the back of them to teach you the basics of the game, which is handy. And let's face it, you're just covering tiny little dice, which are essentially like, you know, they're only this big. They're not giant dice. So the screen only needs to be so big. But yeah, it's produced pretty well for a retail box game. But yep, that's kind of my general thoughts on it. So the question is it actually a Kingsburg killer? Right, the verdict. I previewed last time that this was going to be a Kingsburg killer, and it kind of is. I still actually stand by that. It's not a perfect game. The player scaling could have been better. I think the board should have been designed to handle low player counts better, because I think the board is really at a point where it's better for high player counts, but then you've got the problem with the game length taking a long time. Now, you can bring that time length down, you know, a fair bit when you're familiar with the game. But bearing in mind, this is a game that's set at pretty much light or almost gateway. Maybe, I wouldn't call this a gateway level game, but I would certainly call this a good first entry point into dice placement games. Because let's face it, what is the easiest dice placement game out there, really? Let's exclude something like a roll and write. You're really looking at something like Kingsburg, and Kingsburg is kind of dated now. No one plays it. This one, I think, does a really good job of, you know, essentially giving you what Kingsburg is. A really cool, elegant, you know, fairly smooth, fairly easy, very pretty looking dice placement game to teach you how that system works. The locations are easy, the rules are easy to learn, there's very little in the way of rules ambiguity. The graphic design is decent, even though I wish that the text was a little bit bigger on the board. I do hate the fact that it is kind of like really on the sort of a tight side when it comes to that. Yes, this whole gimmick is like pointless and annoying, but it's not that big a deal because frankly you can just throw these away and never use them again and just use the normal canvas like you do. It's pretty straightforward to just go with that. But yeah, honestly, I think the game is really solid. It's got a good solo mode, it's got, you know, very easy rules, good artwork, very good tactical choices, a little bit of player interaction here and there. The main faults that I can find with it are mainly just the gimmick being a problem, the player scaling not being as good, and the time length being a little bit problematic when you get to 4 or 5 players. I think it's pretty solid. I actually prefer it to Dice Theme Park that I reviewed last week, and I would give Eternal Palace a solid 8 out of 10. It's not quite to the levels of being a Seal of Distinction level game, but I do think it's actually a Kingsburg killer. Honestly, I don't really want to play Kingsburg again. I'd rather pull out this. It looks nicer and it's easier and it's just more pleasing. I mean, Kingsburg, you've got to explain that to new players. And it's like, what are you doing? You get to influence the soldier and the king and you get to build a little village of medieval buildings. It doesn't sound as appealing, does it? Here, though, you get to show them the painting layers in their, like, you know, cool little box. You get to show them the Chinese emperor theme with that really lovely cover. I mean, that cover is gorgeous. I want that on my wall. And once you start messing around with these painting layers, it's a pretty solid bit of fun. Even though this whole thing is a gimmick, you know, they're just worth a victory point each, you are going to get people constantly fiddling around with a little canvas, myself included, trying to build this art thing in front of you. It's really cool. Does the gimmick go too far? Yes. I've already ragged on these. This is where it goes too far. And possibly the fact that it takes a little bit to set up and take down the stuff in this box. This is a little bit irritating. But that's not the biggest worry, because you can find an alternate storage solution if you really want, although this works fine. And honestly, as I say, you can chuck these away and never care. So, yeah. This game is solid. Eternal Palace, 8 out of 10 in my opinion. I'm going to hang on to it, and I'm going to bring it out every now and again for solo mode, or when I've got, say, usually 2 or 3 players who want to play it, or if I'm willing to play it with 4 players, I'll be a little bit quicker with the rules and that themselves. So, I've said my piece on the game overall, but now we need to turn to the chat. So, If I have not mentioned anything that you want to know about the game, now's the time to fire up some questions as to what it is. I'm going to scroll to back to the start because, like I say, I'm not expecting a lot of comments here. But let's have a look here. So hello to Hexy Beast, Chloe, Graham, Michael, Trishol, Mr. Digby, Best at Star Trek, no Star Trek here, Mr. James Dober. So let's have a look and see if we got any questions. First live review, are we looking at the new format becoming a thing in the industry? Probably not. I mean, honestly, feedback-wise, I've been very grateful for the feedback people have given for the live reviews, and it's been both positive and constructive negative. Personally, though, I don't think they're going to work. It's a lot of effort for me to control the stuff on StreamYard and condense my thoughts and keep it to a decent time length. I mean, this is a 40-minute review already. This is going to go on to 45 minutes, and most people don't want to spend that long for a review. So honestly, I'm going to think about it some more, but I don't think this is going to be a thing. Live top 10s are fine. I can do a live top 10 because I just talk normally. But I think live reviews aren't around for a good reason. So I think this might be the last time we do it. But let's have a look. Come on, anybody else? So, are you saying play Kingsburg if you like, but buy Eternal Palace instead? Essentially what I mean is that, you know, Kingsburg is not like a bad game anymore. It's not like, oh, Kingsburg horrible. Although, to be honest, you can only really get it in that second edition. And I do think aesthetically, the second edition of Kingsburg looks poo. It just looks horrible. And so, but it does have the expansion built into it and also has those little extra characters. So you kind of have to decide, do you really care about the aesthetics of Kingsburg second edition? If not, it's still a decent game, but I think this one's better, honestly. I think Eternal Palace just feels more charming, more light. Well, then I think it's easier to learn in Kingsburg to an extent because you've got like 15 different characters or something to learn with Kingsburg. And then you've got all the buildings with their different abilities and how they work. And you've got the little combat round with the tokens. If you throw in the expansions, you can have multiple layers to your village. I think Kingsburg's got more to it than Eternal Palace has. I think this one definitely is a lighter game. So happily, you could play both. I don't think I would own both, though. I think I would own Eternal Palace. I think it has killed Kingsburg for me. Let's have a look. Does this game need an expansion, or does the core game fine just the way it is? Core game is fine just the way it is. In fact, let's have a quick look here. So, the deluxe version has those cool miniatures from the monuments. Whatever. Yes, I don't like having a boring square token for a monument, but big whoop, really. It's not that big a deal. So what do you get in the deluxe version? Expansion modules. Right, so first expansion module. You get this in the retail. It's called Privileges. And honestly, it's just a way of manipulating the turn order. I don't bother using them. I don't think they're necessary. I just think they're kind of a wasted expansion. But this is in all editions. So with the Kickstarter pack, you get effectively four expansions that you could use. And from reading them, I don't think you really need them, to be honest. I mean, the Labyrinth is a sideboard that you can kind of like navigate through with a dice that you use. You basically choose a path, pay some fish, and then move to the next reward space and get something. I mean, whoopee-doo, it's not that big a deal. The River Market basically just adds an additional location, which allows you... it's recommended if you're playing with 4 or 5 players. Honestly, no. I mean, there's enough spaces on the board as it is. I don't really find that it's necessary. But basically, all you do is you get to fulfill demands and you take the cards, and basically it has a reward as well as a penalty. Not that fussed with it, really. Compositions basically add objectives that you can fulfill. So the idea is that you need to get all the painting layers for the composition in order to score extra points. That's alright, but again, these expansions are very small. The locations expansion afterwards is just some slight variations on 4 of the locations that are in the game, and that's kind of it. They're fine. I mean, I played the prototype versions of those expansions. I thought the Labyrinth was kind of a waste of space. I didn't particularly care about the River Market. Really, it was really the objectives and the locations that were the best part. But honestly, I don't think you need it. If you can get the deluxe version, then by all means do, but you're not really losing a core function of the game by only getting the retail version. Because this is only the retail box. You know, this one here, this is retail, not deluxe at all, and I feel pretty content with what I've got here, honestly. But it's good that they put them in the rulebook, just in case you've got them and you don't have to go through multiple books. Let's have a look. Thanks for the review. The easiest, Sagrada. That's an interesting point, actually. I mean, Sagrada to me doesn't feel like dice worker placement. I mean, I suppose it kind of is. I don't know. That's for another day, maybe. But yeah, you could debate that Sagrada is kind of like the easiest dice placement game, even though I much prefer Role Player to Sagrada. But yeah, Eternal Palace is, like, you know, if you're going to talk a big box worker placement style game of resource management as well as dice manipulation and that, I feel like Eternal Palace is kind of like your go-to choice. But it's not a gateway game. Not a gateway game. This is for people who want a light, charming experience for dice worker placement, but don't use this as a way of introducing a new gamer to the hobby, more as a way of introducing someone new to the mechanic. That kind of makes a little bit more sense, because I just think there's too much going on in this game to make it like easy for new players to grasp, and you've got to be careful with these sort of things. So yeah. That's it for me. Like I say, I don't think I'm going to keep this live review format. We're already at 45 minutes. It's, you know, I could have done an express review for this in less than 20. Yes, I've covered it in a lot of detail, but I think just controlling StreamYard and controlling all this other stuff, as well as, I mean, I forgot to do timestamps again. You know, I've got to do them after the fact. I just think it's just too much for the brain to take. People like Paul Grogan have, like, you know, he has his girlfriend help him on live streams. And even he knows that you can only do so much when controlling the stream and doing a playthrough. I think trying to do a review with this doesn't work. I mean, it was fine for these two videos, and I'm glad I tried it out. But I think I'm just going to have to do more express reviews in order to, like, keep up with the games and that. But like I say, it was worth trying it out. And I thank a lot of you for joining me on the journey for my experimentation. Because after all, you got to experiment with the channel. What's the next experiment? Playthroughs. Yes, I'm looking at getting the C-stand that Slicker Drips uses for his videos. And if I can get that C-stand and find myself another camera, I'm going to have to, you know, get some help with the Patreon campaign on that one. But, you know, if I can get another, like a small 4K camera that could attach to that C-stand, maybe there's a way I can work out doing playthroughs, but it's going to take some time and it's going to take a bit of research. So we'll just have to see. But everybody keeps asking me if I can do playthroughs, and other than Tabletop Simulator, there's not many I can do. Maybe it's about time I got with the program and actually tried to sort it out. So, yeah, but that's for another time. I'll mention it a bit more in the podcast when it comes up. So, thanks everybody for joining me on this review. I'll see you on the next Broken Meeple episode that I do. Until next time, you can check out the Dice Theme Park video that I did last week in this live format. Failing that, you can check out what I believe to be the best gateway polyomino game that there is, Alice's Garden, the review I did a couple of days ago. There's more content on the way, including the expansion to Architects of the West Kingdom, the new one that's come out, and there's going to be a KIENDA giveaway. There's going to be a Zatu video where I talk about Catan and, you know, why Catan is still good this day as well. There will be a giveaway of Catan game in there. So more content on the way, but the main thing I've got to think about is my brother's wedding next week, where I'm going to be out of action from Wednesday through to Sunday, but I'll try to get some content lined up for you. So thanks for sticking around with me, and as he says, stay hexy. I'll see you all soon. Take care, everyone.